Hey folks, tonight I've got this book called The Grail Quest for the Eternal by John Matthews. I picked this little book up at the used bookstore, and I mostly got it because of some of this cool medieval and Renaissance art. And I kind of love the artwork from that period, the European art from that period. And so this book has quite a bit. So we'll flip through. I don't think it's going to be too long of a video because there aren't that many pictures in this book, and I'm certainly not going to read it all. So I'll probably read some of the little boxes and some little parts of it. But let's jump right in. The Grail Quest for the Eternal. Jump up to where there's some photos, or some, I guess they're photos of paintings, but you get the idea. Here's something that's labeled, this one's not in color, and it's older. An early Grail king, Nasines, is transported to a mysterious turning island, reminiscent of the turning castles in Celtic mythology and Persian history. 14th century. Let's see if there's a short intro that is worth reading. Maybe it's not too long. I can read something to sort of talk about this story. Well, I'll read a couple paragraphs of the beginning here. The symbol of the Grail has occupied a place in the imagination since awareness of it first dawned in the European Middle Ages, and it continues to exert a fascination upon all who come within its sphere of influence. Yet there is no single clearly defined image of the Grail, nor indeed evidence that it ever existed. Opinions differ widely about the origins of the stories that have circulated in written form since the beginning of the 12th century. Its outward shape is debated. It may be a cup, a shallow dish, a stone, or a jewel. Yet most agree that it is a profound and mysterious thing, perhaps worth giving up the whole of one's life to find, even in the knowledge that the search may be fruitless. It was this quest that dominated the stories of the Grail throughout the Middle Ages, and no matter what form the quest took, the objective remained the same. The spiritual goal representing inner wholeness, union with the divine, self-fulfillment. The scene is usually set in a far-off country of paradisial status, where the Grail is housed in a temple on top of a mountain, surrounded by water and protected by obstacles which only the chosen few can overcome. Its guardian is both a priest and a king, at once alive and dead, and the rewards of the hero successful in the quest are good fortune, blessings, and sometimes the hand of the king's daughter. These elements are the basic matter of the story, and are to be found in varying forms in the worldwide mythological context, by no means always Christian. For though the Grail became firmly entrenched in the Western imagination as a symbol of Christ's teaching, it can be shown that a considerable amount of the imagery originated in Eastern cultures. But before we can begin to separate the many strands that constitute the life of the symbol, it is necessary to remind ourselves of the story as it has come down to us by way of the medieval texts. They tell us almost all we know of the Grail's outward history, and it is from them that the following narrative is constructed or reconstructed. The story begins with Joseph of Arimathea, a wealthy Jew to whose care Christ's body is given for burial, and who, according to some stories, also obtains the cup used by Christ at the Last Supper. While he is washing the body to prepare it for the tomb, some blood flows from the wounds which he catches in this vessel. After the disappearance of the body, Joseph is accused of stealing it, is thrown into prison, and deprived of food. Here Christ appears to him in a blaze of light and entrusts the cup to his care. He then instructs Joseph in the mystery of the Mass, and it is said certain other secrets before vanishing. Joseph is miraculously kept alive by a dove which enters the cell every day and deposits a wafer in the cup. He is released in AD 70 and joined by his sister and her husband, Braun, goes into exile overseas with a small group of followers. A table called the First Table of the Grail is constructed to represent the table of the Last Supper. A fish is laid in Christ's place, at which 12 may sit down. The 13th seat, preserving the place of Judas, remains empty after one of the company tries to sit in it and is swallowed up. The seat is thereafter referred to as the Siege Perilous. According to some versions, Joseph then sails to Britain, where he sets up his first Christian church at Glastonbury, dedicating it to the Mother of Christ. Here the Grail is housed and serves as a chalice at the celebration of the Mass, in which the whole company participate and which becomes known as the Mass of the Grail. In other versions, Joseph goes no further than Europe, and the guardianship of the cup passes to Braun, who becomes known as the Rich Fisher, and he miraculously feeds the company from it with a single fish, echoing Christ's feeding of the 5,000. The company settles at a place called Averon, perhaps the same as Avalon, the Celtic name for the otherworld, also identified with Glastonbury, to await the coming of the third Grail keeper, Elaine. A temple is built on Salvak, the mountain of salvation, to house the vessel, and an order of Grail Knights comes into being. I'll skip ahead a little bit. By this time we have reached the age of Arthur, and the scene is set for the beginning of the quest. The Round Table is established by Merlin, the enchanter, as the third table from which the Grail itself is, however, absent. And a fellowship of knights led by Arthur meet around it, bound by the rules of chivalry. At Pentecost, the Grail makes an appearance, floating veiled in a beam of sunlight, and the knights pledge themselves to go in search of it. And so it goes. This painting says Galahad and Percival rest for a moment and discuss their love for the quest. Let's try and get up to some more of these photos, or more of these paintings. Let's see what this little one says. Galahad prays before the altar of the Grail while boars rest nearby. Let's get up to some color pictures. That's the one I mentioned before. John, the priest king, a mysterious figure whose vast Christian kingdom is here said to include India and Ethiopia, a nephew of the Grail hero Percival. He became the last earthly guardian of the Holy Cup. Here we are with some of these color photos. So let's read these little texts that go with these. The Grail, as it is most often imagined as the chalice of the Mass, the original cup brought from the Holy Land to the west by Joseph of Arimathea, was said to have been the vessel used by Christ at the Last Supper and to have later contained some of his sacred blood. The Grail was thus linked symbolically with the central mystery of the Christian faith and became an object of reverence and a sign of the truth. And this is Ardagh chalice of Ireland, 8th century AD. This one says, beside the spring of Barrington in Brittany, there was said to hang a golden basin which, if used to pour water over an emerald lying nearby, would cause changes in the weather. This recalls both the spring of chance in the Livre du Coeur d'Amour Esprit, sorry about any attempts at French there, and the Alchemo Great Work, with its mercurial waters and philosopher's stone, which, like the Grail itself, is often referred to as an emerald. The creation of the philosopher's stone and the quest for the Grail both symbolize the pursuit of spiritual perfection, also sought by the Cathars. And this over here is Montségur in Languedoc. It was an important stronghold of this heretical sect, and after its fall, rumors circulated of a certain rich cup which had been kept there and which was believed to have been used by the heretics in their secret ceremonies. The carvings of a cup was later found on the wall of a cave beneath the citadel. Montségur is only one of many sites, another being Montserrat in Spain, which were centers of secret Grail worship and so led people to give them names reminiscent of Montsalvac, Mountain of Salvation, the legendary home of the Grail. And this one is Joseph of Arimathea, who is said to have brought the Holy Cup from the east to Britain, stands under the shadow of Glastonbury Tor, his first resting place in this country, or its first resting place in this country. He is also believed to have founded Britain's first church at the spot now occupied by the ruins of Glastonbury Abbey, and to have built there a shrine for the Grail. Joseph planted his staff at the summit of Weariall Hill, at which point it burst into flowers. Scions of the Glastonbury thorn continue to flower every Christmas, and Glastonbury has become the center of Grail stories in Britain. Joseph is said to have received the cup from Christ in a vision, and tradition has it that the authors of the Histoire del Saint Grail received the story of the cup from a heavenly source. Here the dove of the Holy Spirit descends with the book in which the story is written, while God the Father and God the Son watch from above. Uniquely, the sleeping figure is depicted as an oriental, and the landscape is suggestive of the East. The recurrent theme of the East as the home of the Grail is developed by Wolfram von Eschenbach, in particular, who, in his Parzival, makes Prester John its final guardian and thus reconciles the opposition of the East and West. What year was this book made? 1981. Thames and Hudson Limited in London. they use the term Oriental. This one looks like Latin written on it. St. John the Evangelist looks up at the crucified Christ, whose wounds are located on the Kabbalistic tree of life. The tree is made up of 10 sephirot, or divine attributes, which together form a system of universal attribution. Here, 2 of the sephirot correspond to Christ's wounded side. This one is the red mass, is the stage of the alchemical great work, the object of which was the transformation of the base elements in matter and man into higher states of being. Here it is taking place in the enclosed garden paradise and is identified with the offering of Christ who shed his blood for man's salvation. Christ holds out chalices to the sun and moon, while more blood flows from his wounded side into the fountain of life, which feeds the later stages of the work and is crowned by the figure of Mercurius, the divine child whose birth is the outcome of the great work. Let's see, what century was this? This is 14th century France. Percival resting a while on, this one's kind of big, tough to get into the whole frame. Percival resting a while on the quest sees a vision symbolizing the old law, the Jewish religion, and the new law, the Christian church. They are personified by Synagoga riding on a dragon, the beast of the apocalypse, which represents the fallen state of mankind, and Ecclesia riding on a lion, the symbol of resurrection. Ecclesia usually carries a cup in which she catches Christ's blood shed at his passion, the turning point from the old law to the new. The quest for the Grail is a journey from ignorance to enlightenment, and the fact that Percival, the perfect fool, is shown the vision means that, although still far from the full revelation, he is approaching the realization of his goal. Had been a strange time to live in with all this religiosity going on. I guess it would have been normal because you would have grown up in it. In Wolfram von Eschenbach's Parzival, the knights who guarded the Grail were called Templesian, Knights of the Temple, referring perhaps to the historical order of the Templars, who are believed to have possessed the Grail. At a time when Tennyson's Idylls of the King had made the Arthurian legend an English national epic, the artists of the Decadent movement found the dream world of the quest an attractive subject, though they endeavored to inject into it an element of the macabre, which did not exist in the original. Beardsley's Grail remains essentially a decorative motif, though unlike his other illustrations on the theme, which parody the romance and symbolism of the legend. This is 12th century, it says. So this is the round table at Camelot was the starting point for the Grail Quest, undertaken by Arthur's knights, many of whom never returned. Only 3, Galahad, Percival, and Bors, found their way to the castle of the Grail, and only Galahad was permitted to behold its contents. Merlin, Arthur's advisor, had long before prophesied the coming of the perfect king, the perfect knight, who would achieve the Grail and sit in the Siege Perilous, the empty seat at the round table, which symbolized that vacated by Judas, at the Last Supper. Two depictions of a round table. The vessel as a symbol of spiritual transformation and renewal is to be found in mythologies far older than the stories of the Grail. In Greek myth, for example, the witch Medea proved that her cauldron could renew life by cooking an old ram in it and producing a live lamb. The hero Jason, who was captivated by Medea, is also said to have been rejuvenated in this way. And the theme of vessel here meets that of quest, since Jason was in pursuit of the golden fleece. Further west, in that part of the world believed by the Greeks to be inhabited by demons, is told the Celtic legend of Taliesin. Taliesin, who as the boy Gwion accidentally tasted the brew from the cauldron of Ceridwen, a figure very similar to that of Medea, and was reborn as a great poet. Later, acquiring the imprint of Christianity, the vessel became the chalice containing the wine that is transformed into the blood of Christ. The medieval clerics, however, who wrote down the Grail story, looked beyond Christian symbolism to the classical and pre-classical versions of the vessel as a source of spiritual renewal. When Galahad, Percival, and Bors arrived at Sarras, the holy city in the east, they take part in a mass in which the Grail is used as a chalice and where the celebrant bears the stigmata. The Grail King is revitalized by achieving the cup. A circle of 5 petaled roses surround the upraised chalice, signifying the blood from the 5 wounds of Christ. Behind the left-hand pillar, Mary, the God-bearer, the living vessel, holds the body and of her stricken son, whose agony is transcended by the action of the Mass, and the figure of the priest, who bears the wounds from which light shine, pointing the way towards man's salvation and renewal. That's a watercolor. That's this one. And down here, the images. That's England, 1943. Interesting. The images, this one's 14th century. The images of sacrifice, which appear in the more overtly Christianized versions of the stories, indicate that the Grail was meant to be seen as a symbol not only of Christ's passion, but of the individual suffering which must be transcended before the attainment of spiritual perfection. Percival's sister sacrificed her own life for that of a sick woman, her blood flowing into a golden cup, and it is clear that her offering is miraculous, for her body remains uncorrupted and accompanies Galahad, Percival, and Bors to their final voyage to Sarras, where it is buried ceremonially. This painting is the death of Percival's sister. That's Tibet or Nepal, 16th century. Okay. The cup symbolizes the transcendence of life and death, the passage beyond these states into a realm of higher consciousness. Naraka Koma, a Tibetan dakini or goddess, drinks blood from a cup made from a human skull. Symbol of the impermanence of the physical body. In various meditation practices of Tibetan Buddhism, skull cups are used, like the sacred cup of the Grail, as vessels of transformation, sometimes associated with the goddess and her menstrual blood. The cup contains the seeds of release from the endless circle of existence. That's 16th century. This one is a vessel containing pomegranate seeds was offered to the goddess Persephone by Hades, the Greek god of the underworld. By partaking of them as she did, she would have been forced to remain forever in hell, had not her mother Demeter struck a bargain with Hades, whereby she was allowed to return to earth for 8 months. When she returned each year, the land, which had become barren in sorrow for her departure, flowered again, as in the Grail stories. The waste land blooms again after the achieving of the cup. That's Greece, 5th century. This is a manuscript illustration, Italy, 15th century. The central mystery of the Grail is nowhere better summarized than in the Mass performed by Josephus, the son of Joseph of Arimathea, in the presence of the first Grail Knights. 4 angels are in attendance. In Dante's Divine, that's 14th century. In Dante's Divine Comedy, written in the early 14th century when the Grail legend had become widely known, the poet presents us with another kind of spiritual quest. Inspired by his earthly love for Beatrice, Dante made his work a celebration of a spiritual love, that of God for man. In this image, the white rose is a symbol of paradise in which the souls of the blessed are admitted. The rose, shaped like a cup, contains them within its petals. The image of the divine stag, an early symbol of Christ, appears frequently in the literature of the Grail, either leading those who lose their way on the quest or even bearing the Christ child himself in its antlers. That's Germany, 15th century. And this one is the Mass of St. Gregory and the Great. The Mass of St. Gregory the Great, who initiated the mission of St. Augustine to the Saxons in Britain, depicts a miraculous manifestation of Christ during the Eucharist, which was supposed to have occurred in Rome while St. Gregory was officiating. It parallels the mystery of the Grail Mass and indicates the importance of the doctrine of the real presence during the Middle Ages, which held that the bread of the Mass actually became Christ's body. This view was eventually endorsed by the Church and may indeed have influenced the description of the Grail Mass itself, where Christ appears as the host. This is a painting of 15th century. Says it's the actual site of the Grail Castle has been the subject of almost as much speculation as the Grail itself. One suggestion being Castell Dinas Bran in Wales, the supposed home of the god whose name recalls that of Bran, the rich fisher, the first guardian of the Grail to bear the name of king. Another contender for the home of the Grail is the ruined 7th century Takis, or Thorn of Arches, in Persia, built by Khosroes II. Despite its eastern setting and the fact that it remained standing for a very short time, the tact seems to have been the inspiration for a description of the Grail Castle in a 13th century poem. The theme of healing is of central importance to the Grail legend. The Grail King suffered from a wound either in the thighs or more specifically in the genitals, which was caused through the loss of faith or the performance of an evil act. As the Grail can be said to contain healing both of the physical and a spiritual kind, so too the hermetic vessel, the vas mirabile, contains the elements which can cure all ills, including those of the spirit. Here the alchemist walks through a landscape rich with the bounty of nature, which he hopes to draw forth and store in the vessel. From this, in time, will be distilled the divine essence, which gives eternal life and the spiritual understanding, which is the true goal of the alchemical and Grail quests. Germany, 16th century. This one is France, 15th century. The familiar theme of quest recurs in the Livre du Cœur de Amour Esprit, the search of the heart symbolized by the knight. For Grace, a lady of great beauty. It is set in the same sort of mysterious world through which the Grail Knights roamed. The Cœur and his companion, Desiree, undergo many adventures, among which is their discovery at night of a murky stream. And this one is 15th century, wood panel. As in the story of the Spring of Barrington, the theme is one of transformation in both instances caused by the application of water. In human terms, this recalls the rite of baptism, which offers change and new life and is symbolized by the fountain in the mystical lamb. The water flowing into the fountain from two vessels held by the angel echoes the blood which spurts from the side of the lamb, showing that those who receive baptism are eligible also for the redemption offered by Christ. In the Grail stories, this is symbolized by the cup itself, which contains blood and water from the side of Christ, and which through them offers new life. Only 3 knights out of the many who set out from Camelot achieve a sight of the sacred vessel. They are Galahad, Percival, and Bors, 3 very different men who experience the Grail each in his own way, and who represent 3 ways of approaching the mystery. For Galahad, the pure knight, is reserved the way of the spirit of direct communion with the Godhead. For Percival, the simple man, whose name means perseveil, the way of dedication of the heart, which entails a long, hard road towards self-realization. And for Bors, the ordinary man who watches the events but stands a little apart from them, the way of contemplation of the mind. The 3 knights sailed to the holy city of Sarras, variously said to be in the east and in the spiritual realm. The true and proper home of the Grail is paradise, the perfect realm of the spirit, where the priest king, John, its last guardian, reigns benignly from his castle within the garden of earthly delights. To this place the wayfarer comes at last, leaning upon his staff, just as Percival, Galahad, and Bors came to Sarras, bearing the precious cup. Here the poet comes, and the mystic, to learn and be renewed. One of the meanings attributed to the words lapsit exilas, used by Wolfram von Eschenbach to describe the Grail, is the stone of exile. Well, I think we'll end this book there. That's the end of the color photos. Although there are quite a few more photos. Maybe another day we can go through more of these. But I hope you enjoyed this video. Looking at these mostly medieval art, and some stories of the quest for the Grail. A book called The Grail Quest for the Eternal. If you liked the video, please click the like button, subscribe to the channel. If you're already subscribed, thank you, and most of all, thank you for watching. Have a good night.